Hello and welcome to Legal Notions. This channel has been started by four law students with the primary objective of bringing to you healthy legal discussions on a variety of contemporary legal topics, as well as to try and spark innovative legal thought within the community. We feel that the discussions we have on this channel have such far reaching social implications that it would just be wrong to have these discussions within the four walls of a court or within the close knit legal community. For example, the COVID 19 lockdown. This lockdown has seen such far reaching implications, not just on the legal front, but on the social front, on the economic front, on suffice to say, the COVID 19 lockdown has had far reaching implications. And therefore, the legal implications of this lockdown season is one that has to be discussed on a public platform. And therefore, we bring to you this as our first series of discussions. And the first topic that we've chosen in this series is the impact of the COVID 19 lockdown on contractual obligations, especially in those contracts where a force majeure clause is absent. And in order to further this discussion, I invite four final year law students, also my classmates in college, Kritanjali Sarza, Manoj Raikar, Rohan Jacob, and myself to engage in this discussion. I hope this discussion proves to be helpful to all of you all.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. Welcome for the first discussion that we have on the topic. That is the operation of force majeure in cases where the contracts do not have a force majeure clause. So, in the context of pandemic that is we are facing coronavirus 2019, there are contractual obligations that have come to a standstill. What needs to be taken into consideration is the two kinds of situations that are possible. One, a contract which has a force majeure clause, and a contract which does not have a force majeure clause. In cases where the contracts provide specifically for a force majeure clause, the obligations of the parties depend on the interpretation of this force majeure clause. But however, concerning to those contractual obligations in which the contract does not have a specific force majeure clause, what happens in those situations? That is what the topic of discussion that we are deliberating on at this point of time. So we will have each of our speakers today, Kritanjali Sarda, Rohan Jacob, and Louis Unni, and myself included, discuss on the various aspects of this force majeure clause. As to the operation of force majeure in situations where the contract does not specifically contain one. Now let's start with the point of view from Kritanjali Sarda. So Kritanjali, the floor is open for you to discuss on the very point.
Okay, so like Manoj said, in contracts which do not have a force majeure clause, what is the recourse then? Now, force majeure is the creation of the contract, so you cannot imply such a clause in the contract. However, the recourse then would be to the common law doctrine of frustration. So the concept of frustration is again envisaged in Section 56 of the Indian Contract Act. So what Section 56 mainly says that if there is any event which renders the performance of the contract impossible or makes it unlawful after the contract has been entered into, then such a contract will be void. Now, taking in light of the present situation of the COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdown is declared by the government, there are many contracts which have probably been cancelled. You know, the performance of the contract has been delayed in such cases or interrupted. So in these cases, the parties can have a recourse to the common law doctrine of frustration. However, when we look at frustration, the threshold to prove that the contract has been frustrated is much higher as compared to force majeure, because in force majeure, depending on the wording of the clause which has been decided between the parties, the contract may be suspended until the force majeure continues, and then the parties can resume their contractual obligations after the event of the force majeure. And so you can suspend the contractual obligations, and it doesn't necessarily need to termination of the contract. It can lead to deferment of performing the contractual obligations. But however, when we look at frustration, the impact of frustration is more drastic because it automatically leads to termination of the contract. So in my view, first of all, since frustration is already very difficult to prove and it may not always be commercially viable for both the parties to terminate the contract, especially if it's a long-term contract which is mutually beneficial to both the parties, I think it would make more business common sense for the parties to, in fact, come together and renegotiate the terms of the contract and probably provide for innovation of the contract and renegotiate the terms instead of going to frustration as a recourse in this matter.
Yeah, thank you for that. So this brings us to an important next discussion, that is renegotiation. Is it obliged on the parties to actually renegotiate in these situations, provided the contract is silent on this? Now, let's say there was no force majeure clause. That's what the topic of discussion is. So there is no force majeure clause. So how do you oblige parties to renegotiate the terms of the contract to a situation that exists, to an event that exists at this point of time? Louis, if you have any point of view on this.
Right. So now what we see is the essential framework of the contract law in India is stating two major aspects. One is how you enter into a contract, and two is the exceptions to what we call the absolute terms of the contract. Essentially, when you have a particular contract, whatever stipulated within the contract is what happens. However, there are certain aspects that you cannot contract upon. For example, say a minor enters into a contract, that's void ab initio. So such exceptions are drilled into the law within the Contract Act. And one of such exceptions that you can see from the absolute nature of the contract is Section 56. Section 56 saying when there is, say, an impossibility of performance of the contract, or which the impossibility could have always been there, or it could be an impossibility that arises after the contract has been entered into. In such cases, the contract is deemed to be void under Section 56. Now, the two factors under which Section 56 can come into application is two grounds. One is where there is a physical impossibility of performance of the contract, or two, when the object of the contract becomes so frustrated that it cannot become, it is unviable to perform the particular contract. So when physical impossibility of performance of the contract, without doubt, the contract becomes void. The question with regards to when does the object become frustrated is what is really important to be discussed, because we have to drive into the intention of the parties while creation of the contract, and see if that intention of the party can be met, what we call consensus ad idem, right? So if in cases where consensus ad idem cannot be shown, if after the impossible, the is rendering the possibility of performance of the contract has occurred, it is hard, according to me, to still hold that particular contract valid and essential for the parties to come back and renegotiate the terms of the contract. That's essentially why I think the Indian Contract Act does not have a provision for where the same contract can be deferred, and that is essentially left up to the will of the party. And if the parties do will that the contract ought to be deferred, the same should be mentioned as a force majeure clause within the contract itself. So if the intention of the party is so frustrated as that the consensus ad idem, the primary philosophy behind contractual law is not the same later on, it would be really difficult to say that the same contract ought to continue, according to me. I think coming and renegotiating, as Kritanjali suggested, is mandated under the Contract Act.
Yeah, all right. So
one second, Manoj, just to take off on that.
right.
I agree with the fact that ultimately it's for the parties to come together and decide whether to renegotiate. But given the situation that, ultimately it's not essentially the pandemic, but effectively the act of the government in enforcing a lockdown that frustrates a contract, or rather kicks in the force majeure clause. And so in those specific to the lockdown is the situation where if the subject matter is still persisting under the contract, let's take tenancy agreements or lease agreements, right? Forcing termination, as per Section 56, essentially also allows landlords in this specific instance, obviously, to also exercise a right to vacate. Now, ultimately, the right to vacate is essentially the main remedy that landlords can resort to, but you can't kick them out because of the fact that they won't be allowed to go anywhere. It's illegal for them to travel, illegal for them to look for other premises to reside in. So essentially, the obligation to renegotiate in these situations comes in an indirect sense due to the government lockdown that has been placed. So it's in such situations where I would say the subject matter still persists in terms of possession with one party. In such situations, there is a greater obligation on the parties to either create amendments or to novate and create a new contract. So there's a stronger obligation. I wouldn't go so far as to say a regulation or a guideline, but certainly a stronger obligation upon parties to renegotiate.
Yeah, taking a cue from all the 3 points of discussions that we have had, what I can see is that we're trying to delve into 2 different aspects of 2 different concepts. One is force measure and the other being frustration. So I think there exists a thin line of difference between the two. What is force majeure is basically an event that renders the performance of the contract temporarily impossible. That means the performance is still possible, but for that temporary period of time, the performance becomes impossible. Now in the situation that we are stuck in, that is a COVID-19 situation and the lockdown that is enforced by the government. The performance of the contract for the temporary period of that lockdown, that is still the May 3rd, 2020, the performance has become impossible. But wherein you talk about frustration of the contract, like Louis mentioned, the very object of the contract that which the contract is based upon is frustrated. A very easy example that Chetty provides on Chetty on contracts is that, let's say there is a contract which entered between 2 parties for performance. One is a performer in a theater and the other is a theater owner. So in this situation, the contract provides that artist has to perform in the particular theater. Let's say the theater is burned down for some unforeseen circumstances. In this case, the performance of the contract is impossible because the very object, very place where the artist was supposed to perform does not exist anymore. So that is frustration. So in cases of frustration, there needs to be termination of the contract because there is no other possible solution. But wherein it comes to force majeure, where the performance is temporarily suspended, the parties can perform the contract, but after a certain period of time. Now, in Indian context, the temporary suspension of this performance and later obliging the parties to perform the contract, how can it be made binding on the parties? Because the February 19, 2020 office memorandum that was issued by the Ministry of Finance, considers it states that COVID-19 should be considered equivalent to a natural calamity,
Right.
and not an excuse which entirely washes off the liability of the party in their performance, but only temporarily suspend the performance. So now this sparks an important discussion as to how binding is this office memorandum and how can parties be obliged to perform after the event which ceases to subsist. So over to Kritanjali if you have any point on this.
No, I think what you said about the office memorandum which was released, they said that COVID-19 will be considered as a natural calamity, which is usually a term often used in force majeure clauses. But I think I kind of disagree with you when you said that force majeure means that it's not necessary that if you resort to the clause of most force majeure that the performance is impossible only during a definite period of time. It may also happen that the contract is frustrated. The main line of difference between force majeure and frustration being that in force majeure, you have the express or implied terms of the contract itself provide for the remedy. So the contract, if it contains a force majeure clause, it may not necessarily provide for termination of the contract, and it may not necessarily provide for the performance to be done after the force majeure event is over. So it all depends. It's a very fact-specific situation. So it all depends on the wordings of the contract. So the contract may provide that the performance of contractual obligations is suspended until the force majeure event is over, or the contract will be terminated due to occurrence of the force majeure event. So that I think depends on interpretation of each contract, and there's no blanket rule saying that the performance will be deferred in case of a force majeure event. And like you said, because in frustration it leads to termination of the contract, which is why I feel it's a very drastic remedy to resort to frustration of the contract, because it might not always be beneficial for you, because like you said, in long-term contracts both the parties want to maintain that commercial relationship, which is when resort to frustration becomes a very harmful remedy for both of the parties, especially in commercial contracts.
Yeah, so if I may just take a cue from that, agreeing mostly with what Kritanjali has said, that ultimately frustration does not provide for situations where you can defer performance. Well, obviously, force majeure allows, or specific with the contract wordings, allows for suspension vis-a-vis, let's say, termination. In fact, a lot of insurances, like general insurance contracts, in their force majeure clause do specify that servicing of policies and claims would be temporarily suspended during the duration of the force majeure event. So force majeure clauses essentially do cover the remedies that parties may opt for. But if we're looking at frustration, which is in situations where parties have not included a force majeure clause, that's A. The B situation is that the force majeure clause itself does not provide for pandemic, or doesn't have a catch-all provision, or in even in those situations where it does have a catch-all provision, let's say, it only provides for termination. And if we have situations where termination essentially creates or leads to detriment to both parties, then termination is not a remedy that either party would like to opt for. So if we're looking at those situations, let's club them together. One being frustration, the other being the force majeure clause being inadequate or inappropriate, or being an inappropriate remedy. In such situations, right, with especially with frustration, given that Section 56 is very rigid in saying that that the contract is void, and therefore it leads to restitution. I find it hard to say that we can allow for deferred performance, or saying that performance is in abeyance until after the event subsides or ceases to exist. But I feel that, and I guess that's where our discussion ultimately is that there is a sort of gray area where kicking this in, as I said before, kicking this in leads to detriment to both parties. Now, do we therefore say that parties should renegotiate? I would say renegotiation or amendments. I mean, possibly allowing amendments is as long as there is equal bargaining power between both parties, is a valid option. But if we look at novation and we see that there, as per factual circumstances, there are ways for one party to exercise larger bargaining power over the other, essentially um, goes against commercial common sense, and the fact that the parties made the contract for that specified time period to ensure that it did not, or they would eliminate variables in the future, right? So that when they're able to plan business strategies, the fact that they've set it in concrete terms in the contract ensures that there's no commercial instability, thereby forcing them or requiring them to novate the contract. Then, I mean, given the fact that the lockdown has already created commercial instability, I feel like we're just adding on to the burden of parties, especially parties who say are dealing with a larger player, or any party situated in or holding lesser bargaining power.
Yeah, being back from a technical glitch. So like Rohan was talking about an important aspect, right? So a renegotiation or amending the contract to the new situation that has arisen. So now an important question to this point is that now let's say there's a situation where both the one of the party to the contract is not amenable to the aspect of renegotiation. Let's say he's not willing to renegotiate or amend the clause of the contract, primarily because it's not any more advantageous than just letting the contract terminate. In these situations, how do you enforce the other party or force the other party to renegotiate and to amend the contract, or on the forefront that there is no force majeure clause? Louis, if you have any point on this.
Right. So this is what I wanted to say. I'm saying, as I stated earlier, the Contract Act lays down the ways you enter into a contract, and then it lays down what are the exceptions to the absolute terms of the contract. So when I enter into a contract saying, say, a good has to be delivered today, I want it to be delivered today. If it is not, for whatever reason, if it is covered under force majeure, then I have consented to the fact that the performance of the contract can be deferred. Therefore, it can be deferred. However, if for a reason not mentioned in the contract, the party has delayed in performance, at the end of the day, he has breached the terms of the contract, and the only saving grace that comes to him for breaching the contract is Section 56, which voids the contract. And then Section 65 comes in for restitution, that says, or anybody who has benefited wrongly from a void contract will be restituted under Section 65. So the point is, if a party, say I entered into a contract delivery of goods today, there has been, because of the COVID lockdown, the goods was not able to be delivered. And so now there need not be a implied obligation on me to renegotiate and accept the goods later on. What if I don't want to accept it later on? What if I wanted the goods today because I wanted to perform some sort of business activity with the goods today? So I don't think it will be right to, because if you have an implied extension or implied deferment, you would essentially be putting the consensus ad idem concept on the weighing scale. You wouldn't be paying too much attention to that and forcing parties essentially to enter into what can be seen to be a completely new contracts, which I don't think is right. Over here again, the point of frustration, also to prove Section 56, as Kritanjali had pointed out in her initial introduction of our topic, it's an extremely high scale. There are two aspects where physical impossibility of the performance of contract is without doubt an excuse under Section 56. But doctrine of frustration is with regards to the object of the contract. If there has been an old decision, I'm sure it was overruled, where a particular contract was entered into for a lease of particular area for a Tonga stand. And after the lease was entered into, there were no Tonga drivers who came to that stand. So the person who took the lease of this particular area could not gain any profits. Considering the object of the contract was to use it as a Tonga stand, and since he did not gain any profits and therefore could not use it as a Tonga stand, that contract was held to be void by virtue of frustration. Now, that was a very wide ambit interpretation given to frustration in an extremely old decision. Parishottam Das versus Municipal Committee, Batla. Now, this is changed. This has later, by judicial interpretation, we've come to a point where we say just because a contract results in some form of disappointed expectation does not deem the contract in itself to be void. So what we see is the doctrine of frustration has an extremely high, relatively high level of proof that has to be legal standard that has to be met, and we far departed from this Parashottam Lal decision, and the application of section 56 is very difficult. It's very difficult to draw, and hence I think calling a contract void is perfectly permissible under section, because it would be departing from the consensus ad idem concept if we allow for complete deferment, but without unilaterally, or if the force of law comes up and says it has to be deferred. In such a case, we will be departing away from the element of consensus ad idem. In any ways, if a party has to prove that the contract has become frustrated, it is an extreme high legal standard that he has to meet to draw the attraction of section 56.
Now that we have spoken a lot about section 56 and the very aspect of supervening impossibility of performance of the contract, now if I may nudge the discussion to another important topic of discussion, that is adaptation of contract. Now that is what the core crux of the entire discussion now revolves around. Now let's say there is a force majeure, there's no force majeure clause in the contract, and obviously because of the COVID situation, the performance of the contract has become temporarily impossible. Now that's where Rohan's point of information was, right? That, like, the amendment of the contract. Now what adaptation suggests is that now that this situation exists, can the contract be adapted so that the performance still subsists, rather than terminating the contract? The promisor and the promisee are obliged to perform the contract after the event ceases to subsist. Kritanjali, if you have any point or to note on this.
I think obligating the parties to again renegotiating the contract or continuing with the contract after such a situation occurs, I think would not be right in that sense, because again, when you look at frustration, like Louis pointed out, even the Supreme Court has clarified in the recent case of Energy Watchdog versus CERC, where they say that frustration doesn't just mean physical or literal impossibility. It means impracticability, which renders the object and purpose of the contract itself void. So in such a situation, I don't think it's possible for us to obligate the parties to renegotiate. But like I said earlier, it ultimately all depends on business common sense. Because if you have long-term contracts with other parties, where you have supply contracts which are long-term contracts, it's commonly the business common sense would be for the parties to come together and renegotiate the terms of the contract. But I don't think it would be possible for us to have such a situation where you obligate the parties to enter into a renegotiation for such a purpose.
I think also adaptation of the contract in itself will have to be done through means of a new contract. You adapt.
Yeah. It's not necessarily through a new contract. So this was a point of debate, point of moot in the international moot last year. So a very crux as to who can adapt the contract. Now let's say there is a dispute that arises. One of the party does not want to adapt the contract. The other party wants the contract to be adapted. Now can the court intervene and adapt the contract for the parties? Or let's say if the matter goes to arbitration, can the arbitral tribunal adapt the contract for the parties? So this is another whole concept, whole point of moot, right? Now, the power to such adaptation of the contract needs to be rendered to the court or needs to be rendered to the arbitral tribunal for the adaptation to be possible. Such power does not exist under the Indian contract law. In the sense, the Indian contract law does not provide to the court or to the arbitral tribunal the power to adapt the contract. Now, let's say the parties have entered to a contract. The only thing that the tribunal or the court is allowed to do is interpret those clauses of the contract, and based on the interpretation that it construes the contract, the parties are bound to perform or not perform the contract. And like we have discussed, Section 56 will obviously come into picture, and if there is supervening impossibility, it becomes an excuse for breach of contract. In the sense, the parties will be exempted from any liability arising after the contract is terminated by virtue of a supervening impossibility.
Right.
So, if you were to look the very concept of adaptation of contract from an international perspective as well, there is no specific answer when it comes to international arbitrations. Some arbitral tribunals have held that adaptation of a contract is possible, provided the parties allow the arbitrators to act in good conscience. Only in those situations the adaptation is possible, wherein the parties, it has been implied that the arbitral tribunal has given an powers beyond what is determined by the law.
Right.
So
But
yeah,
Manoj,
that is yeah.
sorry, if you want finish, you can go ahead.
No. My only point of contention was that adaptation need not necessarily be the answer, provided because there is no legal backing for the same.
Right. Well, so I to some extent, I'm amenable to the idea that we have a third party, say a court or an arbitral tribunal, come in and attempt to decide the issue. But my only issue, taking off from Louis' point, is with regard to consensus ad idem. Now, the situation is rather unique in the sense that while we're talking about consensus ad idem and we're looking at what the parties intended, it was not foreseeable that parties, or essentially, let's take it specific to this factual circumstance, where parties did not or could not establish, like there was no consensus on both sides, that in such a situation where either let's go on supply contracts, where essentially it's not the manufacturing or the production or the creation of the object of the contract that is frustrated, but essentially the means of transportation, or getting it from point A to point B, which is essentially affected by the lockdown. Now, if we're looking at it from that perspective, I mean, having a third party come in and try to answer a question which the initial two parties didn't themselves look at, and thereby, I mean, yeah, sure, the parties can agree to have a third party sit in and decide what is the appropriate remedy, but essentially the third party has to then look at whatever material is on record. And in such situations, given the fact that consensus ad idem is not even lacking, it's absent in these
Right.
situations. The third party is, I would say, in an even worse situation to arrive at a determination of what remedy is to be looked at, because he can't, I mean, there wouldn't be material for him to look at when so I mean, the usual material he would look at is prior negotiations, characteristics of the goods, and stuff like that. But in
And
such
the contract itself.
and the contract itself, obviously, uh, taking off, I mean, following the parole evidence rule. But essentially, I feel that the third party, even being even more remote from what the commercial sense of the contract was, it becomes harder for him to look at to essentially determine what is the appropriate remedy, and therefore, I mean, enforcing either termination or deferred performance um, places a really big burden on his head. I mean, puts him really under the guillotine. But I mean, if we're looking at, let's look at present third party determination, right? The Bombay High Court and the Delhi High Court have come out, or at least passed judgment in these situations. So primarily, so if you look at I believe the Bombay High Court did not allow the enforcement of a bank guarantee on the ground of force majeure, because they still, I mean, steel was still considered, is is still considered an essential commodity, and the basis of the contract or the crux of the contract could still be performed. But if you look at the Delhi High Court's decision, they've I mean, at least with regard to the recent case, I forget the name. I think it was Vedanta versus Halliburton. But essentially, what they did do is they've completely negated the contract. They've not looked at the contract at all, and they've specifically looked at the circumstances, which is essentially something that is outside the contract. But they've looked at the circumstances to see, firstly, whether it should be allowed, and I mean, they've affirmed that it is a force majeure situation, and therefore the benefit should be given. But when the argument was raised that petroleum is an essential commodity and therefore could still be continued, they've looked at what essentially the service was, which was the drilling of wells, and they said that that does not or is not connected in such a sense to the discretion under petroleum, and they've held that that allows for the enforcement of a force majeure exception, and they've excused non-performance in that situation. So in that sense, I mean, if you look at it specifically from the party's perspective, right, what they essentially expected when they created the contract and they allowed for such remedies, those remedies are then being frustrated by a third party attempting to sit in and essentially determine performance.
Right.
And the third party, at least in the Delhi High Court's case, has taken a rather a social perspective, if I may. I'm not sure if everyone will agree with me. This is just my point of view, but they've taken a rather social perspective, given the fact that everyone's been put under great difficulty, and they've then determined the contract on those lines. So going back to consensus ad idem and what the parties determined the remedies would be, that remedy which was set in the contract is then frustrated. So I mean, if we're going, I'm possibly taking a very commercial perspective, but I feel that essentially the contract then is rendered to be just a piece of paper, and there's nothing that can be derived from it. Back to you, Manoj.
Yeah, Rohan brought up another important aspect, that is social constructs. So the very reason why parties generally enter into a contract is to avoid all the social constructs that can get introduced into the business relationship or commercial relationship between the parties. Now, provided COVID-19 situation, can we now start bringing in the social construct aspects into the contract to enforce, or let's say force the parties to oblige to the promises that they had made when the contract was entered into? Louis, if you have any.
I think that's a very dangerous position of the law. It's setting extremely bad precedent, because you have contract law is essentially right. It's a right in personam. It does not deal with rights in rem at all. It's only regards to obligations that arise through that piece of paper between the two parties that are entering into that particular contract. So now it is very dangerous to bring in other considerations. According to me, when you are determining a rule, a law when you are deciding a case with regards to contracts, even with regards to intention of the parties for entering into the contract, all of that will have to be determined within the four walls of that document, that is the contract itself. So, taking into consideration such extraneous factors seems to be a very dangerous precedent to be setting. However, considering the extraordinary situation that we are in, probably the Delhi High Court found it just. So, I haven't read the decision. I wouldn't know exactly what the Delhi High Court's reason is, but maybe I would only assume that the honorable justices found it just to do that in this particular situation. However, broadly speaking, I think taking into consideration such extraneous factors would not be a good thing with regard while interpreting clauses of a contract.
So just agreeing with Louis on that aspect. Um, Not only, I mean, if we start imputing social aspects into a contract, not only are we eroding at the principle of sanctity of the contract, but
Right.
we're essentially what we're doing is that we're injecting or drawing us back to what contracts were meant to do, and contracts were essentially meant to put everything outside what uh, I mean, essentially what was not considered relevant to the negotiations, but put all these aspects outside of that. And by injecting or by allowing for a social perspective to be added into these contracts, in such situations, like I said, you're eroding the sanctity of the contract, and you're also then, or the backlash that this creates is that companies, let's say larger companies dealing with smaller companies, larger companies are then going to, if they're contracting for supply, then they're going to start making their obligations a lot stricter. They're going to start bringing in like a specific obligation, an absolute obligation, rather than allowing for a certain degree of reasonability and a reasonable degree of flexibility. So what we then, by allowing for this, not only do we um, I would say erode our legal basis, but we also make it harder for future contracts. I mean, essentially make it a lot stricter to comply with contracts in the future.
If I can just add on to that, I think the discussion we are having also highlights a very main point that commercial hardship cannot be a reason for you to frustrate the contract. So I don't think you can get in social concerns when it comes to contracts like these, because one of the basis of contracts, like everyone mentioned, is the sanctity of contract, interpreting the contract, considering the contract itself and the transaction documents basically, which is why I don't think that the courts and the arbitrators can be given the power to adapt the contract, because then that is again going away from the intention of the parties at the consensus ad item, as Louis mentioned. And again, just to highlight again that we cannot have commercial hardship as a reason to frustrate the contract. So just because it becomes more economically difficult for the parties to perform the contract or more expensive for them to perform the contract doesn't mean it is a ground to frustrate the contract and render it void.
Right. I would also like to add that, bigger companies taking advantage of their bargaining position in the market to make it economically unviable for other people to meet their new standards of contractual terms would essentially all be governed by the aspect of competition law. Competition law ensures that there ought to be fair competition in the market, and to that regard, we have an entire legislation, that's the Competition Act. So, I mean, I'm going into a completely different area of discussion. The point over here is whether the contract as is should be adapted later on, or should we allow for renegotiation. I think we can both agree that adaptation of the contract without unilaterally, or say by force of the law, by an arbitral tribunal mandating it, or a court mandating it, would essentially detract from the very sanctity of the contract, as Kritanjali mentioned. So making use of the bargaining power or market position of a particular company to exploit other people would essentially have to be governed by the competition law. And as the competition law is, it is a restriction on the ability to freely contract of parties. You're saying you cannot enter into such agreements, etc., etc. So in a very basic term, we can understand competition law as a restriction on the free contracting ability of parties.
Yeah, now that we've taken different aspects, competition law aspect, and the economic hardship that is to be endured by one of the parties, that he cannot take that as a ground for calling out for doctrine of frustration. So the answer, I think, to all of these issues lie at the very clauses of the contract that make up the contract. So the very essence or the very obligation that the parties are subjected to comes from the contract, and therefore a solution might be found in the very contract itself. So what the interpretation of contract provides is that the contract must be interpreted as a whole, even if one of the clauses is in question. Now let's say there is the question of breach of performance of the contract. Now in this case, the necessity is to make the parties perform the contract. So the solution to this can need not necessarily be found only in one clause, but the contract as a whole. When you read the contract as a whole, now Kritanjali from the very beginning has been mentioning an important aspect: commercial viability or commercial relationship between the parties in a long-term contract. So if they want the commercial viability to subsist between the parties for a long period of time, I think there must be some clause within the contract. Now, let's say an example of a long-term contract be a petroleum contract. There are obviously clauses in the contract which provide for price variations to
Price
adjust the price
adjustment
variation.
clauses.
Exactly. So in these situations, there is an intention of the parties to amend themselves to the changing financial circumstances. So there basically shows a underlying intention of the parties to adapt to the changing needs of the circumstances. So therefore, when you read the contract against such clauses, you can identify that the intention of the party is to continue the contract irrespective of any economic hardship that either of the parties may be subjected to after the conclusion of the contract. So therefore, what I suggest would be that the contract be interpreted as a whole, and in the background of the parties that the contract is composed of. So therefore, providing the solution in the fact that the parties, if they want to continue their commercial viability, would circumvent the problem that subsists, that is the COVID-19 situation, irrespective of there being a force majeure clause in the contract.
Right.
So the intention need not necessarily be derived from the absence of force majeure clause, but presence of such other clauses from where the party's intention can be accumulated.
Totally.
Just to add on to that, I think that's a very nice point, because just because there's an absence of force majeure clause, there can be had recourse to other clauses in the contract. For example, like you mentioned, there are price adjustment clauses in many contracts. In most commercial contracts, you also have a change in circumstances clause. You have clauses like government action or inaction, change in law of the government. So I think if we and you have also have clauses like material adverse effect, any change in circumstances leading to a material adverse impact on either of the parties. So like you said, if we consider all of these clauses and read the contract as a whole, you may find a solution within the terms of the contract itself, rather than taking a recourse to frustration.
Totally.
Yeah. This sort of brings us to the end of the discussion in the sense that there are possible solutions, primarily based on the various situations that may be subjected to the contract be subjected to. So let's all have a 1 minute or 2 minute of closing comments per se to end this discussion on the situation or contractual performance in light of an absence of a force majeure clause surrounding the pandemic created by COVID-19. If we may start with Rohan Jacob.
Yeah, sorry, my net's not that stable. But yeah, so just concluding, I would say that essentially it does become an obligation on parties to effectively come to or fix a remedy that is appropriate to both of them. Drawing on the situation where one party wouldn't want to renegotiate or create an amendment, it then, I mean, I'm while I just to clarify, while I did say it was hard for a third party to determine a solution, I would say that essentially having, or given the fact that arbitral tribunals are not bound by the social uh, aspects or social considerations that courts are essentially or effectively bound by, an arbitral tribunal being set up specifically to determine the issue between these two parties to the contract is in a much better position, looking at it from, if we were to find a solution, the arbitral tribunal could possibly determine, as you said, Manoj, looking at the contract as a whole and seeing whether the parties intended to, or at least intended to ensure that commercial relations continued. In such situations, I would say that the arbitral tribunal would be would be the best situated to determine a possible solution, whether it being deferred payment, deferred performance, or performance after the event, followed by the one party bearing costs, or compensatory release and such and so forth. So I would essentially leave it to the will of the parties firstly, and if there is nothing that can be derived, or no result that can be achieved from that, we then specifically look at only the contract and not incorporate social perspectives into it. Thanks.
Yeah, Louis, if you could summarize your points on
Right.
the same.
Right. I see it as essentially a particular contract is governed by provisions of the Indian Contract Act, and the Indian Contract Act specifically states that if there is an impossibility in performance of the contract, either by physical or where the object of the contract has become so frustrated that it becomes impossible to perform, the contract is void. And that particular clause ought to be followed, unless if reading the contract as a whole, you can show that there is a particular way, as Kritanjali correctly mentioned, a contract is not to be read in isolated clauses. So I think a distinction can be made here in regards to this particular incident as long-term contracts and short-term contracts. So when you're looking at a long-term commercial contract or a long-term contract in general, then in such cases, I think the courts are in a way empowered by the nature of the contract in itself to be able to try and ensure adaptation of the contract later on, if it can make out from the terms of the existing contract that that was the intention of the parties. However, if that is absent, and also in other cases a short-term contract, the enforcement of a deferred payment or a deferred performance of the contract would not be right for the courts to do, because that would be imputing intention to people that really wasn't there in the first place, which is not the court's job, and that would be completely fly on the face of the entire contractual jurisprudence here.
Kritanjali, if you could summarize your point of view on this.
According to me, I think ultimately, like Rohan said, it depends on the will of the party. So, although in situations of impossibility leading to frustration, like I've repetitively mentioned, I think commercially, for long-term contracts, it would be commercially viable for the parties to themselves renegotiate according to their business common sense. However, again, if that's not possible, I think, like I said, you read the contract as a whole. You can have recourse to other clauses like change in circumstances, government action, or in action, material impact on the parties. So I think reading the contract as a whole may also provide the court the right way to interpret the contract. However, I don't think that we can give the power to the court to defer the performance of the contract when the contract itself doesn't provide for such a situation, and if it is a situation of frustration of the contract.
Right.
Yeah, so now that we have reached the end of the entire discussion with the comments as well coming in, I think what can be concluded at the end is that it depends on what the parties want. And no matter which arbitral tribunal, no matter which court gets involved, this solution cannot be found until and unless the parties themselves want to retain the commercial viability between the parties that they are part to the contract. So therefore, at the end, it boils down to the parties' consensus addendum to be able to perform the contract after the pandemic ceases to exist, or after the supervening impossibility of the event that causes the supervening impossibility ceases to exist. So on that ground, I thank all of you for being part of this discussion, and I hope in future we have better discussions on better points of law. And with this, I end today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj.
If you did like this video, please like, comment, and share with your friends. And if you have any topics in particular that you would like us to discuss, please leave them down in the comment section below, and we will definitely have a look at it.